Welcome to Plainsmen Football 2016, but this is a special edition, Plainsmen Pros. My special guest, well, you've seen them before. You know these characters. I call them characters. I say that respectfully, gentlemen, characters. But my special guest to my far right is Jim Riley, and then right here, front and center in the middle, is Ken Mendenhall. Gentlemen, former Enid residents, welcome home, welcome back. Thank you for taking time out of your hectic schedules to be here. This is kind of round two for us. We've already been down this road and we've talked about your careers and talked about the importance of Enid. Jim, let me start with you right off the bat. Your name, along with Ken, is located on the west end zone. It says Plainsmen Pros, and there's a list of about 11 or so names. And let me just simply ask, what does Enid high school football mean to you? Now, I know you came from Bristow and you had a short stint in Enid, but what does it mean to you today?
I'm very proud to be an Enid Plainsman. I always have been. Back in 1961, when I arrived in Enid right before my junior year, I didn't know a whole lot about the town. I got to know about it by going out for the football team. And actually, I met a man that was a friend of my dad's in high school. And it was Rex Martin, and he was the assistant coach to Harvey Griffin. And Rex was a freshman in high school at Capitol Hill when my dad was a senior. So I had that. And he asked me, he said, "Your son Riley's boy?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Well, if you're half as good as him, you're going to make me a pretty good hand." I said, "Well, I'll certainly try."
You'll take that as maybe a compliment?
Well, it was a compliment, yeah. and I believe. But the encouragement that those two men gave me through the last 2 years of my high school career was just overwhelming. And the encouragement this whole city gave us, because Plainsman football was a big deal back then. I mean, big deal. We'd have sometimes 7,000 to 8,000 people show up at Plainsman Field to watch us play, and 4,000 or 5,000 go with us on road trips. It was a part of, it was our life. It was everything to us. You know, it was, and lo and behold, losing the ball game was just unacceptable. We just didn't want to do that. And it was exciting. It was an exciting time in my life, and it had meaning to me. And it still has meaning to me.
Growing up in Perry, Oklahoma, I remember on the when I was in, say, junior high, my sister was a high school cheerleader, and I remember on the away games that we would just load every person up in the car, and you'd have this caravan, and it was just like the whole town of Perry shut down on Friday night because we'd go to Pawnee to play or something like that. But I remember as a young person, the excitement it was to load up in cars, decorate the car with streamers or something like that, and off you went to the high school ball game. It was really pretty exciting. Ken, in your case, it's kind of similar. I think Pawhuska is near and dear to your heart, but then also you made that transfer to Enid. Yeah. Tell us about how the impact that Enid High School has on you.
Well, you talk about playing in the pros. I wouldn't have ever played in the pros. I just barely did by the skin of my teeth, but
that's all it took.
I wouldn't have if I had not moved to Enid prior to my sophomore year in high school. And last time I was on the show, I told you that Rex Martin was as good as football coach, line coach, position coach as I ever had. I had some really good ones, and he was as good as any of them. So being under him, the level of competition, just not Friday night, but in practice. So it was the basis for my beginning to have a career weight training program that Rex had initially employed, was way out in front. When I went to the University of Oklahoma, the weight training program was not near as sophisticated as Enid High's. So, you know, it was at a different level. And then, you know, the icing on the cake was the championship teams and games that we played in. So it didn't get any more thrilling than that. One of the things I was thinking about after we had talked that I didn't bring up was when we won the first state championship game in Stillwater. It was on an afternoon, and the buses that took us to the game came back, and they drove around the square at least a couple times, and there were people 6, 7, 8, 10 deep, cheering, and I'll never forget that. So it was such a significant part of my life and football career, obviously.
That's certainly a memory maker,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, as you notice, ladies and gentlemen, on our studio set, we have the Dolphin helmet in front of Jim and then the Colts helmet in front of Ken. And no way are we making reference that I played football at OU, but that's the one I ended up with, just for clarification, let you know. But we do have one thing in common. We all graduated from the University of Oklahoma. Now, gentlemen, I graduated in the top 10% of the lower 1/3 of my graduating class, okay? So that's my claim to fame, if you will. But take us both back, and Jim, let's start with you. I believe you were a senior when Ken shows up. He's the young kid, and he's a freshman or something at OU when you're a senior. Tell us about the days at OU.
Well, my days at the University of Oklahoma was a dream for me. My dad had gone there as a freshman in 1941, and he was just there that 1 year, and then of course the Japanese had something to do with that, and he went to war, and he never did come back to school because by that time he had me. He had married my mother, and but it was a dream of mine. I mean, I thought Bud Wilkinson was God. I mean, that was my God back then. And my senior year here at Enid High School, him and Gomer Jones came and visited me at my home with my family. And I was so nervous, I nearly wet myself. I mean, and somebody asked me, said, were you ever going to go anywhere else? I said, heavens no. I said, they didn't have to really recruit me a whole lot. When Coach Wilkinson asked me if I was interested in coming to the University of Oklahoma, I said, yes, sir. Where do I show up? What do I do?
What time?
And then I found out you can take all these trips. And so I took a trip to the University of Texas. And the reason I did is I wanted to meet Darrell Royal. I wasn't going to go there, but I wanted to at least meet him. And on that Sunday morning time when they bring all the recruits in and the head coach would talk to each one of them, he asked me, he said, son, he said, I'd ask you a question. Are you really serious about coming to the University of Texas? I said, no, sir. He said, you're going to the University of Oklahoma, right? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, let me ask you another question. Why did you come down here? I said, I wanted to meet you. He kind of laughed and he said, well, son, I guess you and I will see each other a lot in the Cotton Bowl, huh? I said, yes, sir. And after that, Coach Royal, actually years later on, became a friend and really a special guy. But that's the only reason I went to Texas. I wanted to meet Darrell Royal.
I want you to know that we'll somehow or another we're going to make sure that this show ends up on OU highlights of some type of program, because I just know these behind the scenes stories are real jewels, and I appreciate you sharing those. But somehow we'll make sure the University of Oklahoma gets a copy of you guys' comments. So keep that in mind as you're sharing that. So Ken, All-American at OU. Tell us about your days, if you would, please. Or just really kind of the synopsis of, this was a true highlight at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, Jim was a senior when I was a freshman. Freshmen weren't eligible to play. We did not even practice on the same field, so we had a freshman team and a freshman schedule and so forth. But we had really an average freshman team. I was considering going to the University of Arkansas really strongly, but Jim McKenzie called one afternoon, I think it was in February, and asked me what I was going to do. And I said, well, Coach, frankly, I think I'll go to Arkansas. I had a great visit over there, and they have great teams. They'd won a lot, and Harry Jones, one of Jim's teammates in high school, had showed me around, and it was terrific. Coach McKenzie asked me if my mother had started supper. And I said, I checked and said no, and he drove to Enid from Norman that night. Took us out to eat dinner, and my dad said something to the effect, he said, son, I don't know if Frank Brawls would have done this. So that made my mind up, and we got a lot of other great players in that freshman class. And unfortunately, Coach McKenzie died my freshman year, but the next year is when we went 10-1, went to the Orange Bowl, won the Big 8 championship, won it again the next year. So it was a terrific, again, a terrific time. We were winning championships. So, you know, right from high school to college at OU, another terrific time and great and great years, great teams.
I think either one of you can address this, but based on your high school career, you're used to winning. You're used to winning. And I hear this often with different kids from Texas, Oklahoma, doesn't matter where they're from, but their high school programs are very successful and they don't lose. So when they go to college and lose a game, 2 games, 3, this is not what we do. There's that adjustment. I think that's a pretty healthy attitude, right?
It is.
You want to bring somebody that doesn't enjoy losing. Was that an adjustment for you?
You know,
Say the college ball from Plainsmen football to college ball, what was the key adjustment for you, Jim?
you know, you're talking about the winning and losing. I'm 71 years old. I graduated in 1963.
You look great, by the way.
In the fall of 1962.
Yeah. You look great, by the way.
Oh, thanks. We lost to Northwest Classen by a score of 7-6. That loss cost us a chance to go compete for the state championship. And we're still whining about that. It still bothers a lot of us. A lot of us guys get together that played together back then, and we still talk about it. And you say, well, that was only high school. I said, you don't understand. It was not just only high school. It was part of, you know, I went to that game, that first game. My little brother played. He was a senior when Ken was a sophomore. And I went to Stillwater, and I watched that state championship game, and I watched my little brother and Ken and my brother-in-law, Kurt France, win that state championship. And that was exciting to me, just because they were doing it.
Because that's your school.
And it was my school, and it still is. And I still, although I became an Edmond Bulldog 32 years ago, and my son played there, we'd come back once in a while and play Enid, and it was kind of strange. But blood is thicker than water, and I did become a Bulldog. But I still have a lot of my heart is still in Enid, Oklahoma, and a lot of the good things that happened to me started right here.
Thank you for joining us today on Plainsmen Football 2016, and this is the Plainsmen Pros edition. My special guest, Jim Riley, on my far right, and then right here in center, Ken Mendenhall, both of them former Enid Plainsmen, of course, Enid residents, and we'll talk a little bit more about their pro career right after this. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Plainsmen Football. I'm Steve Keim, and I have the privilege of being joined by former Enid residents and former professional football players, Jim Riley and also Ken Mendenhall. And gentlemen, again, appreciate you coming home to Enid to be with us here at the Enid Television Network studios today. Now, Jim, you're representing the Dolphins there. You're part of the no-name defense. We go back to 1972, which happens to be the year I get out of high school, so that dates both of us, okay? But I got out in 72. But you played for the Dolphins from 67 to 73, and correct me, both of you gentlemen, if I get these dates wrong or whatever. But it's the no-name defense, it's the undefeated Dolphins, it's the world championship, if you will. But then you throw in some injuries as well. I mean, pro football's pretty tough. So just kind of give us this little synopsis, if you will, of your professional football experience.
You know, everybody wants to talk about the success. But my 6 years with the Dolphins was not all success. Should have been around those first 3 years. Because I came to the Dolphins the second year they were in existence.
I was going to say, because they were like a brand new out-of-the-box team.
We were in the AFL. From 67, 68, and 69, we were still AFL. In 1970, my 4th year with in the league, it became all NFL, the AFC and NFC. But those first 3 years with the Dolphins, winning games was not part of our deal. We won 3 games my first year. We won, I think, 3 games my second year and 5 games my third year. We got a little bit better. But that was a little tough, you know. And we played in the old Orange Bowl. And the Orange Bowl hold 80,000 people. And we might get 20,000 to come watch us play. It looked like the Orange Bowl was empty unless the Jets would come to town, Joe Namath and the boys, and then it would fill up because we had so many New Yorkers down there. But it wasn't all. It was a lot of losing and a lot. But it was, you know, like I say, a brand new franchise. George Wilson was our coach, and he was putting together the nucleus of that championship team. And in 1970, they fire him, and they hired Don Shula from the Colts. And Shula came in and had instant success because we had the whole team there waiting for him. We had just traded for Paul Warfield, who was a great wide receiver, right. Marv Fleming, a great tight end. We'd gotten Bob Matheson, linebacker from Cleveland. George made all of those trades. And here comes Shula and his group, and we started winning instantly. But we were getting ready to do that. In 1970, we win 10 games. In 71, we win 12 games. And of course, in 72, we win them all. Injuries, yes, is a part of it. What I watched in professional football is watched a lot of guys. In fact, the guy that I took his place my rookie year was a 10-year veteran. He had bad knees, and he was a great guy. Ed Cook was his name, and he was my roommate on the road. And he played 4 games that year, and then he couldn't go anymore. And then that's when I started. They put me in, and I started after that. But I watched Ed, and I listened to him, and I talked to him. And he said, Jim, whatever happens, if you really get hurt bad, don't try to get another year in. He said, if you get hurt bad enough that you can't run like you're supposed to, retire. And that's exactly what I did. In 1972, I get hurt during that season. And the next year, in 1973, I retired. Because, and this left knee of mine, I just got it fixed here about 1.5 years ago. I got a knee replacement. I got phlebitis in my leg, and that is a blood clot disease. I laid in Mercy Hospital in Miami for 28 days after my knee surgery because of the phlebitis. Had morphine 27 of the 28 days every 4 hours. It was not fun. It was, and I don't remember most of the 72 season because I was messed up so bad. Yeah. And but when I made that decision, I remembered what Ed Cook told me all those years ago. It's time to get out of this. And after 6 years, I retired.
Your comment is so true that a lot of the interviews or the shows that you see of past teams and their seasons, and a lot of time on a particular sports network, they'll take a particular team from back in 1981 and kind of go through that season. And it's all glamorous, it's all winning and everything, but they don't touch on the fact of how many people got hurt or never played the game again. Ken, I remember an earlier conversation. Now, let me back up just a moment. Now, you'll notice that Mr. Riley, since I'm way over here, Jim is he's a big old boy. That's what we say in Perry. He's a big old boy. Now I'm not necessarily a big old boy, but Jim is. And then you look at Ken Mendenhall. He's lean and mean, and this guy played center for the Baltimore Colts. And I remember the story during, I guess after a couple teams you end up with the Colts. but you were had to weigh in, and you needed some quick weight, and so you found some weights to attach to your hips or whatever. Tell us that story about how this little center needed to gain about 30, 40 pounds real quick.
Well, actually, the Colts were not my third or fourth team. They were my fifth team.
15, okay.
I've been cut by 4.
You're welcome to correct me, gentlemen, all the way through this.
I've been cut by 4 teams.
I didn't realize that.
And all of them had losing records. And my second year, I got a call from the Colts who had won the Super Bowl the year before. So, my chances, I thought were pretty slim. But I wanted to take advantage of that. And fortunately, with a guy named Bill Curry, Bill was an all-pro center, with his trade and an injury to another player, I was able to, in 1973, begin to play and start. But during the course of the season, I would lose weight, just wear down physically, and I probably was playing at about 225, and I knew that that was light, and that I didn't want the coaches to decide that I didn't weigh enough, and therefore they needed to get somebody else. So, in my cleverness, I fashioned together 2 weights, 2 5-pound weights that I could tape to my side with a T-shirt hanging down. So every weigh-in, or most of the weigh-ins, I weighed 10 pounds more than I actually did. So, that's ethically, was that wrong? Yes, it was. But I didn't want the coaches moving me out of the starting position because I weighed I was too light. I wanted, if they're move me out of that position, I wanted to do it because of my performance.
Sure.
So I told on myself with that. I guess the last time we were talking about that.
And Ken, I find that same problem. When I step on scales today, I'm looking around for the weights that are attached, because I'm thinking, wait a minute, where'd this number come from? I don't remember that. Ken, let's start with you as you continue to talk about the days with the Colts. Besides the salaries and the size of these guys, what would you say personally, what is the main difference in pro football today versus your tenure with the Colts?
Well, those are the biggest differences. I can remember, and Jim can too, that you were expected, or you ought to have a job in the off season. I know he did, and I tried to do some different things because this isn't going to last very long, and that's not a whole lot of money. So most players were working in the off season doing something to try to.
In the off season, excuse me, Ken, at that time, give us the time frame. We're saying January to August. Is that off season?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, January to July when you
Okay.
went to training camp. And that's one of the other differences. I can remember driving to training camp on the 4th of July and going through about 7 or 8 weeks of two-a-days. I was talking with Gary Gibbs, who's
that's character building.
who's the linebacker coach for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he was showing me their schedule. I said, Gary, where are the two-a-days? Oh, we don't do two-a-days. I go, you got to be kidding!
Yeah.
You guys don't do two-a-days? How will you know who's tough and who's not?
Right.
So it has changed in that sense. Being the old school, they didn't work. They don't work as hard as we did.
Well, I can't relate to either one of your career in collegiate or professional, but I remember two-a-days at Perry. That was character building, and it did determine if you really wanted to do this in August heat or not, if you really wanted to play ball or not. Jim, let's direct this question to you. Do you notice any differences that just stand out and that you may refer to your wife and say, well, that's not the way it was in the old days?
Well, I need to one up on you guys. When Don Shula showed up in 1970, we had a players' strike for 2 weeks. So we missed 2 weeks of training camp. Shula shows up, it's his first year, and he says, gentlemen, we're going to have to make up this time. So we're going to be practicing 4 times a day. Our big fullback, Larry Zonka, was sitting next to me, and he whispered in my ear, he said, guy's nuts, you can't practice 4 times a day. On our 5th week of practicing 4 times a day, I asked Zonka, I said, Larry, I said, I thought you said we couldn't do this. He said, by God, we better win. He said, this is ridiculous. Because we would practice early in the morning, mid-morning, afternoon, and night. And then we did that for 5 weeks. Now, we didn't do it, and we was playing exhibition games on the weekends. So on Fridays, we just practiced twice. And then we'd go play an exhibition game, and then we'd start again on Monday, practicing 4 times a day. So that was, Sheila put on the board the winning edge. He said, yeah, the winning edge is practice forever. We can't get in trouble, we're too tired. We're just we're worn down. But he had his way, and his way was successful. It was successful but nowadays, they wouldn't put up with that. When you sent me this little cheat sheet that I made some notes on, you ask about, besides the salary, what's the difference in pro ball today versus today? Well, they're bigger, faster, and stronger. I'm not sure they're any smarter because I've seen some of the stupid things they do. But better training is what they got. They train better. How they train today is, they know what they're doing. Back, and it's just, how tired can we make these guys? And that's what's going to make them, winners. And as time went on, of course, after you go 40, 50 years, they learn. Yeah. But yeah, that's something that I've been amazed at watching some of the training facilities and how they train them today is so much better than what we had.
And even in the collegiate level, how the training facilities, locker rooms, and fields and everything has just really been enhanced. Well, our special guest today on Plainsmen Football, Plainsmen Pro Edition, if you will, Jim Riley from Edmond, Oklahoma, and Ken Mendenhall from Oklahoma City. Is that right? Edmond? Okay. And we've been talking about their days in Enid, Oklahoma, and also their collegiate days and also on the professional football field. But when we come back from the short break, we're going to talk a little bit about what they've dedicated their lives to. To me, these gentlemen that I've enjoyed getting to know have committed their lives to make a difference in this world. And we're going to talk about that right after this. So thanks for staying with us, and hope to see you in just a moment. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on Plainsmen Football, Plainsmen Pro Edition. And forgive me for repeating myself, but this is just a real treat to get to know these gentlemen that have a connection to Enid, still have a connection to Enid to this day, but both live in Edmond and have dedicated their professional lives, if you will, of helping others. And Ken, let me begin with you. You're a part of an organization called Search Ministries. Tell us about Search Ministries. We touched on it in our first visit a little bit, but tell us about the ministry and then really how people can reach out to you if they want to learn more or be part of what you do.
Steve, Search Ministries is a national organization, parachurch ministry. People don't know that name necessarily, but they probably know the Fellowship of Christian Athletes or organizations like Campus Crusade for Christ. They don't have a denominational affiliation, but they're an evangelical ministry. The focus of the ministry that I'm with is to adults, and there's an emphasis on Christian apologetics. In other words, giving reasons to believe and overcoming the objections that people have. Because people have legitimate objections. They've had bad experiences, or they've gotten maybe bad information about Christianity, about the truths of Christianity. So we work real hard to overcome that. Most of the people that we relate with, or the target audience, are those that are outside the church. So we have to go outside the church. Not that I don't do things in church, I teach in churches, but we create environments, call them safe environments that people can come to and listen and then hear their objections answered. So that's the focus, is on the marketplace, usually professional people. My partner, I moved to Oklahoma City 29 years ago, and about 12 years ago persuaded Mark Burgett, who was the managing general partner of the largest law firm in Oklahoma City, to come on board with me, and you know, his audience, the people that he was related to, were perfect. So that's the focus of it. And of course, the message is, of course, the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news that the death of Christ provided payment for the penalty of our sin, and that anyone trusting in the living Christ is forgiven and has eternal life. So that's the message that we proclaim. But it's getting people who are, for some reason, from a bad experience or bad information, distant, and wouldn't darken the door of a church, but would sit in their own conference room and engage in a discussion about it.
And we can put the website and that information on the screen, Ken, but how can people reach out to you? They say, well, you know, I heard what Ken had to say. I would rather talk to Ken. Is there any way that they can reach you directly, or is there just
yeah, sure.
particular phone number?
Yeah, all kinds of ways to reach me. Okay. The easiest way to reach me is to call me or use the search website. I mean, okay. I can't imagine without a couple clicks anybody not being able to find someone else. But just search Ministries in Oklahoma City will give you that result.
Jim, I remember in a conversation we had months ago that you talked about your best friend, Robin. And so Jim and Robin Riley, they've dedicated their lives to the pursuit of serving others. And it's called the Jim Riley Outreach Incorporated. And I believe this began in '86 or so with your best friend. Tell us about your work, Jim Riley Outreach.
Jim Riley Outreach is it's a Christian-based ministry dealing with addiction and addictive behavior. And that is something that's special to me because I myself am a recovering alcoholic and addict. I've been in recovery for over 31 years. And if it wasn't for my best friend, Robin Ann, I wouldn't be here today. I would have never survived. Because of her love for me and her willingness to do what had to be done to intervene on me and get the right people to be there. In fact, the right people, one of the right people there was my old football coach, Harvey Griffin, and his wife, Hazel. They were at my intervention, and I'll never forget. Harvey was the first one to intervene on me. He looked at me and he said, "Son, I want you to know something." He said, "First of all, I love you. You're like one of mine." He said, "But I'm ashamed of what you've become." And he couldn't talk anymore. He choked up. And there was a man that next to my own father, I put no one ahead of Harvey Griffin. And he was crying in front of me. And about that time, I'm thinking, my goodness, what have I done? What have I done? And by that afternoon, I'm in a treatment center in the middle of the desert of Arizona going, how did I get here? And life started changing for me then. And then about 11 months after that date, something else happened to me. My friend Norm Evans, who I've told you about, right, played offensive tackle with the Dolphins for 10 years, he had a ministry, and I knew about it. Of course, he started the NFL chapel programs in 1967, my rookie year. I remember we used to draw straws to see who had to go to Norm's chapel because we didn't really want, none of us heathens wanted to go, but we'd go because we liked Norm. Right. And I called him, and him and his wife Bobby and their two little kids lived right next door to us in Hollywood, Florida in 1969 when our son Blake was born. So we got really close, and Norm and I practiced against each other my whole career. I butted heads with Norm Evans for 6 years. And I called him to make amends to him for some of the things I'd said to him about him behind his back. And he started crying over the phone. He said, "Jim Riley, you know how long I've been praying for you?" He said, "Since 1968. And this was 1986. And him and I got hooked up started going to, he had a ministry called Pro Athletes Outreach at that time. And Robin and I went to, oh gosh, I don't know, 10 or 12 different football conferences they had. But the first one I went to, he invited Robin and I to come to Scottsdale, Arizona. And something happened to me that week in the desert. Is I told Robin, I said, I want to do what my small group's telling me I need to do. I want to ask Christ into my heart. And she and I got down on our knees beside our bed that night, and I asked Christ into my life. And my life hasn't been, it's been different ever since. And it's all been good. And a lot of good things have happened. A lot of bad things have happened too, but the bad things we can deal with. And I've learned how to live like a man should live. I've learned how to be a husband, a father, a son, a friend, all because I've changed my life totally. And that's what I try to teach men, because I only work with men. Don't understand women yet, not old enough. But my wife deals with the women, and together we work with families.
Jim, I appreciate you sharing from the heart, because oftentimes when we're in a setting of talking football or pro football, it's real easy to talk about it was 3rd and 18 and this play happened and we did a double reverse and a pass, or so-and-so ran it back 102 yards. But this is rubber meets the road kind of stuff, and it's good, and I appreciate both of you, your openness to share. Again, Jim Riley Outreach, you can find, you can search that on the internet, Jim Riley Outreach Incorporated, and also Search Ministries with Ken Mendenhall. Gentlemen, tell us about your current connection to Enid today. Ken, we'll start with you. Besides your name on the West End Zone board there, I know Jim, he's up here quite a bit. Tell us about your connection to Enid.
Well, my connection with Enid is that my brother, Dean, who's 5 years younger than I am, played for the Plainsmen as well, lives here. He and his wife, Sherry, have lived here maybe the last 10 years. So I have a brother that lives here locally. The other connection is my nephew, Jay Mendenhall, is a head coach at Oklahoma Bible Academy, and so I'm excited about that. And I know that they won their first game last week, and he's asked me to come out and speak to the team this afternoon. So I'm especially excited about that. So those are a couple connections that I still have.
And Ken and I were introduced last year. You came back for recognition. What team? What year was it? I'm trying to remember. 60.
It was the first state championship team, and first of 3, and I was on the first 2 of those. Interestingly, in this next month, we're going to have our 50th high school reunion.
Okay.
September 24th, and of course, my senior year, we actually won the state championship in football and in track. So we had pretty prominent athletes. And you talk about, your name being on the stadium and the pros. I'm telling you that Enid had great players, top to bottom. Football is a 11-man sport, and linemen count the least. You don't change games with a lineman. You can as a quarterback. But we had great teammates, guys that went on and had their own careers, and so you're only as good as your weakest member on a football team. So our names and other names might be on that board, but there's hundreds of others that contributed to that. So trying to make stars out of 1 out of 11 guys is a little bit inaccurate, but nevertheless.
Well, we certainly have a mutual friend, Bob Zoll, who I know through in Oklahoma City, through the Rotary Club in Oklahoma City. And Bob was instrumental to say, hey, Steve, we got a reunion coming up, and you need to meet Ken Mendenhall, and maybe he can get him on the show. So I appreciate all the connections that both of you gentlemen have in town, because they've reached out to me and say, hey, you need to interview Jim Riley. Well, I've seen Jim Riley in the Daily Oklahoman. There would be newspaper articles, but I hadn't met before. So I'm glad that you still maintain these Enid connections that allows me to get introduced. So, well, we have a few more questions for both of you, but we need to take a short break. And thank you again for staying with us on this special edition of Plainsman Football 2016, and it's Plainsman Pro style, or segment, if you will. So thanks for staying with us. We'll end our show here in just a moment. We'll be right back. Again, thank you for staying with us on this special edition of Plainsman Football, Plainsman Pro segment, and my special guest to my very far right, Jim Riley, and also right here next to me in the center is Ken Mendenhall. Now, we've already discussed your relationship as a kid growing up in high school, I should say, in Enid High School, and collegiate ball, professional football, and your ministries and so forth. But I'm curious to know about your relationship today. Both of you are in Edmond. What kind of relationship do you have? You just see Jim once in a great while, or tell us about your relationship.
What we try to do between Ken and Merlane and Robin and I, and also Steve and Susan Zabel.
Okay.
Susan is an Enid girl,
Okay.
was Susan Fields back then.
Okay.
We try to get together. What we've been trying to do is get together once a month and have a dinner together and just have fellowship. Ken is, we go to church together. We go to the same church, and he's our Sunday school teacher that I go to.
We need that on record, so
yeah.
say that again twice, Jim.
Yeah. Ken's our Sunday school teacher there at our church that we go to together. And we, because of my wife and his wife's, they've been bosom buddies forever. And it's especially in the last 30-some years. Before that, Ken didn't want to have a whole lot to do with me because of some of my lifestyles was kind of a little different than his. But anyway, it's worked out really good that we've had this great relationship for a long, long time.
And Ken, here's your opportunity to either validate what he said or tell us the real story on the relationship.
No, that's all true, and at the heart of that relationship is a relationship that our wives have. They're closer than two friends that I've ever known. I've never seen, and so if I want to get a fight started, I say something bad about his wife Robin, and that'll, because she'll defend her to the end. But no, we have had a great relationship. And one of the things that I didn't mention, that when I was, I guess it was my junior year, and Coach Martin used to come in and tell me that he wanted me to watch some film during my lunch break. We didn't have very long off for lunch, and he would put on Jim Riley tapes of him playing, and he would say, "I want you to play like he does." And I said, "Well, I'd like to too, but he's about 30 pounds heavier and 2 or 3 times stronger." But I can remember that. I never told you that, but he would have me come into lunch, and he would put film on. So, Jim and I have known each other for a long time, and he was obviously a terrific player at Enid High School and OU. So I've been far enough behind to always admire his play, and then see all the life changes that have taken place over time, and how Christ has impacted him so dramatically.
Well, this is a special edition of To Tell the Truth, right? Wasn't that a show at one time? Gentlemen, we need to close out our interview today. And again, I appreciate you making the journey up to Enid to visit with me again here on the Enid Television Network. Jim, let me start with you. You never know who's watching these shows. Mm-hmm. And I found out since our first interviews. I can be standing in line at a restaurant ordering a sandwich, and someone will come up to me and say, I saw you on that Ken Mendenhall guy the other day. Or they'll say the same thing about, I didn't know Jim was still around, or something like that. But it's amazing the people that will end up watching these shows. And so, Jim, is there a word of encouragement, or I just want to give you the opportunity to offer your closing comments. And again, thank you for being here today. And I just want to give you this opportunity right now.
Well, Steve, I appreciate it, and I want to thank you. I've gotten to know you a little bit better, of course, over the last year, and thank you so much for having us up here.
It's our pleasure.
In this cheat sheet that you sent me, mm-hmm. and I like cheat sheets because it kind of helps me prepare a little bit, but you ask how could I encourage a young person? You know, sports and things that we accomplish and all that, those are good. That's all really special stuff. Mm-hmm. But my relationship with God is the most important part of my life. And it has been for a lot of years. And it means way more to me than all the Super Bowls, state championships, whatever that you could think of. And I am not ashamed of saying that, you know, that's how I feel. And I wanted you to know that, again, all the stuff is important. It's like the ring I wear. The only reason I wear this ring, it's not even my ring. This Super Bowl ring of 1972, I gave it to my son when he was 15 years old. And when he was a senior in high school, I was going down to Ardmore High School to do a program, a drug and alcohol program for the high school. And Blake come running down the stairs with this ring. He said, "Dad, I want you to wear this ring because kids will want to see it, and I want you to wear it every time you do something important like a speech or any of that sort of stuff, or if you're at one of my football games." I wore them to all of his football games. But this is not my ring, it's his. And I wore it today because it's something that he would have wanted me to do. And I've been blessed with a lot of things in my life. And I'm blessed with a lot of people and that have been good for me. This guy next to me is one of them. I thank you.
Jim, I appreciate you sharing because, ladies and gentlemen, there is so much that has not been discussed today, and I encourage you to go to Jim Riley Outreach, and you can learn more about Jim and his work, and also his son Blake, and commitment to honor his life and so forth. There's just so much more that could have been shared today, but take a moment and research on Jim Riley Outreach. Ken, successful Enid High School, All-American at OU, and the fifth team, thank you for clarifying that, the Colts. Kind of sounds like you've had some achievements, but what would be your word of encouragement along lines of like Jim offered?
Well, it would be along the same vein in the sense that the spiritual is what's enduring, lasts forever. We'll be all gone before we know it. And what we take from this life is what have we responded to God, to the Eternal One, and that's at the heart of what I've been doing for the last 29 years is proclaiming that message, and the life changes that take place as a result of accepting and trusting in Jesus Christ to change our lives. And frankly, football, through the influence of an old offensive tackle. I don't know if Bob Vogel and you went head-to-head. Yeah. Bob sure Vogel was the most instrumental person in my life in becoming a Christian. He led the team Bible study. And I didn't want to go, but my wife insisted that we attend, and I had a lot of good excuses. But that's the first time I ever really clearly understood. So, you know, football has been terrific, but most specifically it's been terrific because of one person that I admired and respected so much, clearly showed me what it meant to be a follower of Christ, and encouraged me to do that. So it's all come full circle.
Well, gentlemen, we certainly appreciate your time today. And the City of Enid and the Enid Television Network has been partnering with Enid Public Schools, and that's why we do many of our interviews to feature high school athletics and so forth. And appreciate you coming back to continue this tradition of talking sports, if you will. Provide you a couple coins. And those are from the City of Enid, and we hand those out to special folks. So, gentlemen, you fit into that category of special folks, but we'd like for you to take those coins and just remember how much, you don't need a reminder of how much Enid is important to you, but that's just our thank you to say thanks for being here today, and thanks for the role model that you are today. outside of football. You're leading a life of making a difference in a professional setting. And well, I just appreciate you coming back and sharing that story with everyone. So,
Thank you, Steve.
Ken, thank you
Thanks for
so
having
much.
us.
Excuse me as I reach
Thank you, my
across.
friend.
Jim, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being with us today again on Plainsmen Football 2016 Plainsmen Pros, my special guests, Jim Riley and Ken Mendenhall. And thank you as being our special guest to join us today on the program. And I look forward to getting another update. Maybe next year or so, we'll find out what these two characters are up to. We know dinosaurs. That's right, dinosaurs. And so anyway, with that being said, thanks for joining us. Until next time, make it a great day.